Okay, so the films that we had just seen, I'm going to start with questions to Ivars because that was also chronologically the earliest film in today's program, and just to say at the beginning that it was the first film which Ivars made together with the director Ivars Seleckis. And they worked on 5 films during 1960s, and they were. This was one of the teams, or one of the really two people who did a lot for developing this kind of new approach to documentary at the time. And I would like that Ivars tells us first how they filmed the coast, and what was the collaboration between Ivars as a cameraman, and Ivars Seleckis as a director. And just to mention that for those who came to film Bridges of Time yesterday, you saw Ivars Seleckis also as one of the characters in the film.
Es saprotu, jā. Man sakot, šī filma tieši 55 gadu atpakaļ mēs pabeidzām filmēšanas periodu šajā filmā.
It was exactly 55 years ago when we finished filming this work.
Jā. Tā bija mūsu kopējā pirmā filma.
It was our first work together with Ivars.
Protams, mēs tad nefilmējam, kad šie ciemati bija ar dzelzceļdrātiem. No jūras norobežot, tas neietilpa arī spēles noteikumos, bet mēs bijām spiesti tur dzīvot, un tad mums bija daudz laika, un mēs iemācījāmies pētīt cilvēkus.
So the film was made on the western coast of Latvia, which was Soviet Union western border at the time, and it meant that it was also closed for regular inhabitants. It was not possible to go on the seaside whenever anyone wanted, and so they spent quite long period of time just observing the people, watching how they are going on their daily lives.
Mēs mēģinām izveidot ciematu kolektīvo portretu, viņu dzīves stilu. Mēs izdomājam, kā to darīt. Tas bija ilgs laiks, mēs kādu mēnesi tur dzīvojam. Mēs izdomājam, kā tikt galā ar to, ka nekas nenotiek. Ja?
So we wanted to create a collective, a unified image of a village, and it was a place where nothing really significant happens, and we had to face and try to figure out how to represent that there is really not any significant events, and there's just kind of very mundane little things taking place every day.
Tā filmiņā mēs izstrādājam turpmāko spēles noteikumus, jo mēs sapratām, kā mums jāstrādā, atradām, kā jūs redzēt, mums ir tādi poetiski ievirzi vai, var sakot, tēlēni, mēs atradām zirgu, atradām rokām pieminieku un vispār tādām strādājam ar tādiem vispārinājumiem.
And this was it was the film where we developed our style, and we developed the way how we continue to work in our next films, and it meant that we try to discover in some things or some objects. We try to make and see another meaning in them. For example, as there is a film, a scene when this wooden a piece of wood looks like a horse, or there is the net is like a monument to human hands.
Var teikt, ka tas jaunais filmas kino teorētiķi ir beigušies, bet man iekšā viņš turpinājis joprojām, viņš tiek uzlabots.
And for Ivars, for him, he says that for film critics or film theoreticians, new wave is already has already passed, it's already gone, but for him it still continues and it's still inside.
Un es jūtu visu šos gadus, 50 gadus, visu laiku jūtu, ka tur kaut kas uzlabojas. Nu, tiem principiem es nekur neesmu tālu aizgājis.
And he also thinks that he hasn't gone far from the principles that they discovered 50 years ago.
Nu, es domāju, tas īstenībā būtu visu.
Okay, and so shortly that's from his side. Yes.
I would like to tell that it's a great film because you recorded history and sort of real core of fishing culture in Latvia as well in Estonia. But I would like to express my compassion to you because, and Andres Freiman is because you in 1965 were working for state-owned Riga Film Studio first. Second, it was a very important ideological institution and you couldn't finish films where the kolkhoz starts. And the problem is that people were not happy in kolkhoz because their own boats were taken by state. Most of them were sent to Siberia and other parts refugee to Sweden. And those who stayed on the coast, they were also selected people who could go out of sea because they had from KGB special permissions for that. They were not so happy as you have to show to get this film on a screen. I was in the very same time on the Rune Island, which was 35 kilometers only from the coast, from Ruja. And there was a kolkhoz by name Lighthouse of Communism. But I was making just 3 films only for myself and not for television. And I had no obligation to show that people are happy on that island. They were not happy. But this is a background of situation to understand in the right way what kind of film you have to do.
Mums bija pirmā filma, un mēs veidojamies, un mums bija tādas spēles notikumi. Mēs tās zeloģrās nerādījām, jo tik tā nebūtu iespējams vispār rādīt.
It was our first film, and of course these were the conditions of the game which we had to apply and then of course we knew that we can't show the barbed wire which is present on the seaside, but so this is what we had to do.
Pēc tam Latvijas publika zināja situāciju, tā nebija, Latvijā zināja situāciju, tā nebija jāskaidro. Ir situācija jāskaidroja tagad, bet toreiz tā nebija jāskaidro, visi zināja.
And in Latvia at the time, no one actually needed any explanation because everybody knew that that it is like it is.
Jo mēs jau visi iebraucam 3 km zonā, un visi jau tu zini, ka tu nevar iebraukt, tas jau iespējams noteikti bija skaidrs. Bet visi caur Indijam jau saprot.
Yeah, so we got the permission to get in this secluded area, but yes, it was everyone knew about it. And what I also wanted to ask, and that would regard not just Ivars but also the other directors present, is how did you decide and when did you decide on the particular use, the combination of sound? Because I think that in all 3 films, also very important is both the choice of the music in combination with particular images.
Jūs domājat par muziku?
Jā, par muziku.
Bija tāds cilvēks Ivars Seleckis, kas mīlēja taisīt sintētisku muziku, un mēs pie tā domājam, lai varētu izstāstīt par to, kā dzīvot šie vispārējiem ar zirga tēlu, ar roku tēlu, ar muziku speciāli tika kombinēt. Tā ir muzika tādas, viņš ir sakombinējis, viņi no komponenta viņš ir savāks.
We had an important composer and sound designer at the Riga Film Studio, Ludgard Gedravic, and he worked on this film, and he really carefully planned and selected from the existing sound material at the film studio the music which would create this kind of synthetical connection with the particular scenes. The ones, for example, with the horse or with hands. So it is really a work of Juda's
bet viņi redz, man liekas, tā viengabalā iespēja. Tomēr neskats to viņi ļoti tādu organiski.
And Ivars thinks that it does have like this very natural combination, yes, together with images and sounds. And now to you.
Heli kasutamise tekkis?
See on puhtalt helikujundaja teema.
They had sound designer Ivalo Randalo,
kes on muusikateadlane.
who was a scientist, researcher of the music.
Originaal kohviku orkestri muusikat kasutades oleks tekkinud monotoonia.
He suggested not to use the sync sound, the music from the cafe, because it could have been too monotonous.
Ja tol ajal Beatles'id olid väga moes.
Beatles were very popular at that moment.
Ja olid lubatud ka.
And also there was legal. It was legal for us because the Soviet Union was not signed the contract.
Ja siis selline muusikaline lahendus nagu harmoneerus, ütleme, teksti osa kasutamisega. Nii kasutatud ühelt poolt poeeti ja teiselt poolt mingisugust populaarteaduslikku kirjandust.
And we thought that this kind of solution will harmonize very well with the textual solution, which was partly poetry, and the other part was popular scientific text about the Mars.
Ja lisaks muule me tahtsime olla moodsad.
And also we wanted to be trendy and modern.
And were you? How was the film received at the time?
Kuidas film sellel ajal ette võeti, ta ilmus?
Noh, tol ajal oli nagu kaks vastuvõttu. Üks oli kohaliku võimutasandil ja teine oli siis lõpliku hinnangu pidi andma Moskvas asuv kinematograafi.
At that time, the reception was on two levels. First one was the local level, and the other one was the state kinematography committee in Moscow.
Ja Moskvale see film ei meeldinud.
Moscow didn't like our film, they didn't understand the film.
Ja sellepärast ta üle suure Nõukogude Liidu ei levinud välja arvatud Eesti.
It was circulating only in Estonia, geographically, not in the Soviet Union.
Aga Eestis võeti ta nii enam-vähem.
But in Estonia it was received so quite well.
Sest kõik olid selle kohvikute probleemiga või noh, kui seda probleemiks võib nimetada, olid tuttavad, nii et ja ega ma seal midagi ei painutanud teemat nagu üle.
Most of the people in Estonia were familiar with the subject of coffee place, coffee culture, and I didn't violate it anyhow. That's it.
And you were shooting with the hidden camera, right?
Varjatud kaameraga.
Enamjaolt, jah.
Mostly, yes.
Ja.
And how long time did it take to collect all
Kui
the
kaua
footage?
kulus, et kogu see materjal kokku saada?
Noh, eriti palju, üks paar kuud.
Few months altogether.
Mark tahab esimene.
I would like also congratulate Andres because just only today, 50 years later, I discovered the hidden value of that film. And I tell you, what is the hidden value? The hidden value is continuity of traditional cultural civilized society which existed until Soviet occupation. And if verbal texts were changed under Lenin, Stalin, Karl Marx and so on, but body language was kept in coffee shops. Waitresses were behaving like before war, being very polite. And you saw in the very beginning of the film a generation of coffee shops, the old ladies. So among them was my own, my mother, and previous generation. And the music also belonged to their generation. And even in first Soviet newspapers in 1940, 1941 were announcements. Just nationalized coffee shop Feichner, but quality is not changed. I had cut them open, I have that in my home. So this is a hidden value. Listen, even in Havana in 1974, 16 years later after revolution, 15 years later revolution by Castros, I met in huge newspapers, restaurants and coffee shops where body language was the same from the previous society. And nowadays even we can see in our restaurants and coffee shops the behavior of people like in Soviet regime, which is awful.
And unfortunately, we didn't manage to see all film of Women of Kiknu, but it will be screened also tonight. So you can join us for screening at 6:30, and then Mark, so from your point of view, how did you? What was your decision? Why did you want to make and why so? Kind of the work with the films.
My subconscious idea was to keep alive this little community which had traditions from the previous societies, previous 600 years of history, all regulations on islanders, which were to help in each situation each other, not to compete, but help each other, not to take another's bread, but if you have more fish to share and distribute with others. And on this base, what kind of culture was created by previous societies. And when I sent my first scenario to Moscow, because to get the permission for full-length documentary, we couldn't decide that in Estonia, we had to get permission from Moscow. And they said, no, it's nothing. So I had to send the new scenario, and the new scenario was just concert of amateur folk artists, of songs dedicated to the communistic regime, and the title of the film was a concert of amateur singers of kolkhoz Soviet guerrilla. And they said, oh, that's fine, let's do that. And this is, you saw a staged scene when the newborn child is coming in airplane, written SSSR, which means USSR, landing on island and bringing a newborn child. There were two sequences, just glorifying, Soviet regime, but all others was very ethnic, and you can see all of this film tonight. We had to pay a little bit, contribution to those who made the decisions in Moscow, and also there were a lot of people who sold their soul to Soviet regime, who freely signed papers. Oh, this could be deported, this could be imprisoned.
And Ivars just mentioned that he made later a film, so more than after 30 years after the post, film called the Salted Life, and that was and at that time already they could show kind of that side of the barbed wire which is not included in the coast. So also that in that sense by the change of regime, by the change of time, it was at some point again possible to show something which was not allowed to be shown. And there they had that, and in that film they already could, they already filmed the sons, which are like children in the coast. It's like the next generation already, which is growing up in a different society. So probably we could take a couple of questions from the audience if you have now, and then we could continue with the screening of the next two films. Yes, please.
I'm just curious if they had seen or were able to see films by, say, the British group, the Free Cinema Movement, if they had known of others working in similar styles around the world, or were they pretty much on their own?
I studied in the Moscow Film Institute from 1965, and we had a very good selection of all new films. Lotyšsky came with his Man and Woman, Agnes Barda came with Bonheur, Le Bonheur, Pasolini came with Evangeli for Matteo, and so on and so on. And especially Flaherty and all others were on our screen. So I forgot my own small films because they are nothing comparing Flaherty. But I think our colleagues the same, because we all have studied in Moscow. There was only choice to study filmmaking. It was in Moscow. There was no any opportunity even to study in Poland, in Lodz, or let's say in London or in Paris. There was no way.
So Andres agrees, though he had been in Moscow a bit earlier, but the same, he saw also films in the secret screenings, so-called secret screenings, or for the selected audience only.
Our institute was quite open for world-famous filmmakers. They came and visited us and showed some new films and asking our opinion. For example, Mikhail Brom showed to us his Ordinary Fascism, asked our suggestions, and as on the first screening he was just improvising his text. We suggested him, don't write any text, don't write, do in the same way, and he made, and finally we got great masterpiece, because we understood that speaking about fascism, he was in the very same time speaking about communism and the crimes of communism. This was absolutely obvious, and we supported it in the 60s.
And Ivars, from his part, is saying that even though they haven't seen, they did not have on a regular basis the possibility to see like what is going on in world cinema or what has been made previously. Even though, of course, Ivars was also studying in Moscow, and the same as the other filmmakers, they had this choice to see the films, but. In his perspective, it's actually it was their advantage that they did not know probably that much, because they could take their own choices, their own artistic choices, and figure out their approach by themselves. And the director Ivars Seleckis, he had no film education at all. He was a journalist, and he started to work in newspaper, and then just gradually he ended up in film studio. And also Ivars was just starting his studies at the time of the film. Yeah, so this not knowing, this lacking of awareness of previous tradition was actually really helping them.
One young Finnish communist came to study in Moscow Film Institute, and he, after graduating, said that I'm arrived here as a communist, but I leave from here as an artist.
Can I reverse the question and ask, where did their films show? And did they ever get outside of their own countries?
I took my film along to Paris in 1975. Went directly to Musée de l'Homme, to Jean Rouch. We got friends, and he screened that in the Museum of Man. in December 1975, and I left a copy to him, so it was my first screening abroad.
And in the case of The Coast and other of Ivars films at the time, they were shown in Latvia and in Soviet Union, but not really abroad.
Mainly documentary films were screened before the main fiction film in the cinema theaters. It was like a supplement to the main. And Andres also said that only in the 90s he could start traveling with his films, not earlier. But the amount of viewers was always quite high because they had to watch them anyways. They wanted to see some blockbuster. You had to watch also documentary.
We had first the breakout from the Soviet Union with the Baltic film program in Switzerland on the Neon Film Festival. All the three countries were invited. It was in October 1987. And just before next year in Berlin, also big program of our documentaries. And thankful to family Hadens, who were directors for the both festivals. It was first breakout.
Okay, so we'll take the last question and then continue this program.
Thank you for being here. It's absolutely amazing to have you. I would like to ask you, you were creating in terms of repression, and then countries after some time regained the independence. What did it change in terms of filmmaking for you?
Could you repeat your question? Just last.
When the countries, Estonia, Latvia, regained independence, did it change anything in terms of filmmaking for you? Because you had another environment to create.
Many of us created their own studios immediately, and we started to compete and not to work anymore. So, supporting each other, like on islands. Today's people are fighting against each other to get bread and fish, not anymore supporting each other. This is the result. I'm sorry, I'm sharpening you a little bit, but that's it.
Ivars is saying that from the practical point of view, like how you film and they didn't change, but like of course mentally it changed a lot.
And
And it's just to add that he says that it was easier for documentary filmmakers, because they could also like really kind of film what is happening around, and also financially it is less expensive than it would be if making a fiction.
And Andres says that right when these crucial events started, the artistic values were not that important anymore because they had to reflect all these political events and so-called fulfilling of these holes, grey holes or white holes, how you call them. This was the main thing to do.
I think also that artistic value went down. The reason was you could say on media everything directly what you wanted to say, and you were not anymore imprisoned. In Soviet time, we had to find patterns of images and to speak with coded audiovisual language, not saying, maybe saying, glorifying, Soviet regime, but doing that, in that way that people understand that this is a lie. I am absolutely sure. When people were watching your film and the last part of your film we saw on screens, that they understood that this is a lie. And the period of lying media was not starting now in this millennium, it started already much more earlier.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you all for joining in the discussion, and so now we go back to our seats and continue with the program, and then we'll talk with Laila and Audrius. I'd like to ask Laila so this film, the Linen, is Laila's graduation work at the All-Union State Institute of Cinematography in Moscow, and also both directors they are from the generation which started to work in filmmaking at the second half of 80s, beginning of 90s. So it is like a time of various changes in respective countries and in Soviet Union in general. So in that respect, so we don't see anything from kind of the actual turmoil or all this that kind of practical and all these different like political direct political links to the current situation. And I'd like that Laila would tell us about how did you intend to choose to make a film Linen in such a way, and how did this idea came to you, and also how did you carry it out?
In fact, yes, it's my schoolwork, and I just want to repeat what I said yesterday. In fact, I graduated film school with 2 films. This black and white Linen, and another was about barricades, which we had in 1991 in January in Riga. But it's a film about barricades. It's also in the same style, in the same observation style, because somehow during film school I understood that there will be never voiceover in my films. Of course, never say never, but till now, no voiceover. In fact, I'm not doing interviews, very rarely music, and so those both were. And concerning the Linen, I remember. I made the one about barricades, and my teacher said it's not enough to graduate film school. And then I very fast needed to get idea, and I was sitting, and it came to me in 2 minutes, because my husband, who is a film director as well now, he told me that in his when he graduated school, he worked as driver in kids' hospital, children's hospital, and I suddenly understood that it is what I want to try, make film about pain and suffering without showing directly this process of without going inside of the hospital. And when I finished this film, I was okay with my master, Victor Lisakovich. He just understood that I'm a bit different from others. So I was making different films. And he never ever said to me something bad. But there were other teachers. One of them said, "Wow, you made such a cold film," because there was no music and no text. But yeah, maybe I answered your question or not. I don't know. But it's kind of natural. You just go and make film. It's right now we are already talking about something theoretical, but it was just go out and make film. But I thought that you will ask me, do I feel some connection with this poetical?
That's some other part, but yes, yeah, please do.
Yeah, you know, now, after yesterday's party, I feel real connection. Really?
Yes, because previously, yesterday during the day, you said that there is no connection, but so now you feel
now I feel
party.
this connection because also, you know, and it's about this festival something. Because, for example, Ivars first time in his life he heard me speaking, and now when he explained about coast, how they were working, it's exactly how I work with kids. We just stay on place and wait, and this is exactly how he's making them. But okay, go on.
This is also the question to both of you. As the previous speakers, so Andres, Ivars, and Mark, which often are both like doing both tasks. They often are both cinematographers and directors. So it means that also it is kind of a different way how that you kind of make choices more on your own. But in both, like in your case, what about and how do you communicate? How do you find a connection and like common language with the cinematographers that you work with?
Let him speak first. I already spoke.
My first film I made with somebody who never did any film before. That was my first film and the first film for my cinematographer. And it was for both of us, it was very interesting. I'm speaking about Death of the Blind, that was my first film. But for the second film, I decided to do differently, and I chose the oldest cinematographer in Lithuania and most experienced, but who never made documentary films. He was well known, he was working with Kozintsev, a great Russian director, and Stanley Kubrick, and he was the star in fiction film, but he never in his life made the documentary, and that was, and he was quite old already at that time, so that was his first experience with the documentary film. So I felt that we both felt this as an adventure, and I just remember that then while I was trying to explain him what I want, how I see the film, was listening, and then he said, "Okay, can you stop now and don't tell me about what you want and what this film is about. Just tell me what I need to shoot, and that's it." So and this is the result. Actually, it was it's like experience for both of us.
As Laila already answered about her connection, now established connection with Latvian poetical tradition, how it is about you and with the former generations of Lithuanian characters of 60s, 70s?
It's very direct connection.
For a long time already.
From very beginning, I was in love with the films of Ivars Seleckis and Mark Soosaar, Seleckis, and so I knew all these masters long time before I started to study in Vilnius Conservatory, and then I met my main teacher in my life, Henrika Šablevičius, who took me even deeper there. So I see myself as a I don't know, pupil or continuation or somehow follower of this tradition.
I wanted also to and how both like your film and your film, how were they received at the time, and how and did they like, for example, differ from like 90s documentary tradition in Lithuania in your case?
I don't know. I don't know how they were received in Lithuania. Country was very busy with this political change. I don't remember that it would be some kind of reaction that I would remember. But the film was started to travel, and this is what the recognition came from outside. It was a really great festival in Denmark. It's in Bornholm Island. It was called Baltic. And this is where which opened doors for the Western audience, for not only for me, but for Donas Matalis and all my generation, and also the generation of the filmmakers we're speaking about now. So this how the journey started, and then the films got the recognition outside. Of course, they were accepted and appreciated also inside of the country.
And it is Laila after the Linen made 2 more films, which after that were kind of branded as a trilogy. So The Mail and The Ferry. And could you also tell like how did what was kind of your intention when you were making this? Were you thinking about the Linen as well, or have only like we after the time see them as like a trilogy? Yes.
Yeah. It's so at first we called it trilogy because we also wanted to have like premiere party. I never had premiere parties in my life, so when we finished the 3rd film, we wanted to have a premiere, and we needed to put those. You can't do premiere for 10-minute films, so we put 3 films together and call it trilogy. And it's, by the way, it's a bit, but not in this direction. But I went to this cinema called. Which belonged at that time to Audrius Stonys and he said, you know, you need to pay for cinema. By the way, we paid, and he said, you know, but when you will die, I will make your retrospective for free. Right now we are kind of changed positions. He unfortunately died, and festivals around the world making my retrospectives for free.
For him.
Yeah, and it's and then years later it was like maybe only in Latvia called trilogy.
Okay, so we could take also now a few questions from the audience, and then I'd like Mark and Ivars to join us as well, and Andres. No? So.
Yeah, but we are running out of time, so we have like. Yeah.
Okay. So then we just can go on questions to you both, and also to Ivars and Mark, if there's any. Yes, please. Your thoughts about today's program or the films?
Outside of festivals, how can one see the films? How are they available?
I could answer for example, for Lithuanian colleagues, I could answer that there is now a website made by this association Meno Avilis, which also digitized and restored the Audrius's film, which we just seen. And they have made now a website called Cinemateca. And on that website you can see the films they have restored and digitized. So that's possible. And they have now only the Lithuanian version, but the English version is coming very shortly as well. There's not that much, but still. Sorry?
There's also DVD available.
Yes, so also DVD. And I think with these Latvian films it's probably more tricky, I would say. We used to have also DVD on these films of Audrius Browns, but it is already a long time ago a rarity. It's been sold out. And new ones, hopefully, new releases. We have to work on that, but yeah, it's quite. It is actually quite difficult still. And for Estonian colleagues?
In Estonia, some of the films are online already, mainly that were produced in Estonian telefilm. And also we have issued some DVDs, collection of Andres Sööt. It's available on DVD.
And then I would like to ask, so myself to probably while we are all still here, that we have, so we have called the newspaper Baltic New Wave, and we had also made the program with the idea to bring together films which are an example of kind of a new kind of cinema of the time, and try to see them all kind of as a unity and as to find out the kind of the common trends among them. But what is your opinion on the idea of the poetical documentary? Because in Latvian context, we have the notion of Riga school or Riga poetical documentary cinema, which was the term gradually came in the scholarly and film criticism language in like mid-60s. But has and of course it can also be understood in different ways, and also the filmmakers themselves, they have different opinions what it actually is. But what would be your thoughts on can we look at this geographical location as some kind of unified cluster of films, or what is your thoughts on poetical filmmaking of Baltics to everybody?
I would like, in addition to my previous speeches, tell you that father of Andres Sööt was shot to the death in 1940s by Soviets, and he was deported with his mother to Siberia. And if you follow entire his creative life, there is a lot of takes for Soviet representatives of Soviet regime, but always he was laughing at them. And not directly, but our people understood two levels. First level is a lie level, and another is a truth level. We were taught by Soviet ideology to read what is written between lines. So we developed artistic language to tell truth, and facade had to be lie, a Soviet lie. So it needed. It's like always when you live in totalitarian system. Take, for example, paintings by Velázquez or Picasso or so on. There is a situation where you have to develop your own language or your own images, which tell you no truth and which could be fit into the system which is making a total lie. So, but what is your question?
I think that you were kind of also answering to the question,
okay,
that you were about the language, that you had to think about the language in which you could speak indirectly.
And today the artistic system is not developing very well, because there is a media, there is everything is saying the truth, there is only censorship in all, I think even in European countries. It's stated in the constitutions, no censorship, no censorship. But those who are in power, and who have public money in their hands, in parliaments, in local administrations, they do everything that there will be only truth from their side and not enough truth from the ordinary people who are suffering.
And other
I just want to add that yes, of course I'm not comparing Soviet times and independence times, but the system is always is system, and you, as you said, those administration and
selecting all the time.
And in fact you need to create some language, even to write projects to media, for example, and yeah, you just I think artist is always alone.
We need
against system.
In all times, the artist must try to find ways to tell truth, and media people, most of them say need to be near to the pole or to have their own pole, which is in contemporary so-called free or marketing society is based on money. So in newspapers, on televisions, all channels, they are saying, oh, I need to do that to run money.
Yeah, that's, as you said, the pressure it's not only political pressure, it's pressure of the market. And so this, and also the films, the poetry is a kind of opposition to something that to the mainstream. What we're going, your films has to be really sellable. They have to attractive to thousands. They have to have certain pace, a certain format, and this is such a huge pressure, and you need some, as this at the Soviet time, you have to be brave to somehow to do differently. So now it's also it needs bravery to resist this and to do the films you see, and also it's our time is called post-truth time, and it's now official. We're living in post-truth time. There is no this big narrative. There is no. They saying that there is no truth. So I think the task for the filmmakers and not only filmmakers but also for artists to say that no, there is truth, and to try to look for this truth. It was at the Soviet time, and it is now, and it's forever. Probably this opposition of the artist against the mainstream is eternal. I think it started with the art and will end with the end of the world.
I must tell you that this is also lies that we are living in post-truth society, because it has lasted all the time. It's an eternal situation for real artists.
Okay, and
tā, 1963. gadā Rīgas kinostudijā tā filmiņa ceļamā nokļuva Pelšas referātā, kas iznīcināja mūsu studiju.
And so Ivars, I saw that in 1963 it was again a film made by him and Ivars Seleckis called Descendants, and it was also a short film about a youth who is working at one collective farm. So the film was condemned by local Communist Party official.
Jā, mēs to viņu uzrakstījām sūdzību. Pelši 3 cilvēki visi, redaktors, Rēmons un es, un nesūtījām uz Maskavu Hruščovu. Iemeta draugs un atbrauc scenārijs un iemeta Kremlī sūdzību. Mēs nepiekrītam.
And they wrote a complaint that they don't agree with what this party official is saying, and they sent a letter directly to Moscow, to Khrushchev.
Jā, oficiāli. Atbrauca briesmīgi Maskavas delegācija, ko neviens negaidīja, un mēs visi palikām dzīvi. Bet skaidrs bija tas, ka analītiskais kino tika apturēts. Mēs pārgājām vispār cilvēciskām vērtībām.
And so there was the delegation sent from Moscow to check the situation, and they discovered that everything is more or less okay. There's nothing that they should be that much worried about. And so that was kind of a break, like a line after which it was recognized that it is possible to make really films more about like real people and real situations.
Un sākošo no 64. gadā Rīgas kinostudija strādāja vairāk uz vispār cilvēciskām vērtībām. 77. gadā bija tāds teorētiskais simpozijs, kad mēs apskatījāmies, kas ir noticis pa šo laiku. Tas ir pēc kādiem 13 gadiem laikam, jā.
And so then in 1977 in Riga started a documentary film symposium, which was biannual event to which there were film practitioners and film theoreticians taking part. They were watching films and discussing them, and in this symposium tur ļoti liela auditorija tika savilktas rezumē un tika konstatēts, ka tas, ko viņi redzēja, ka tam ir to nosaukt par Rīgas poetisko kino skolu. To arī saukt būt citādāk par
tēlu kīnosko, vai tā viņš tas teikums parādījās, tas ir oficiāli scenārija. Un tā, kopš tā laika, tas iet mums līdz, tas periods no 74. līdz 77. gadam, kā tas. Nu, un tālāk, protams, notika pārmaiņas, kino attīstījās tālāk, bet tas jau cits periods.
And so this event was really significant because there was one of the film critics and he's also a scriptwriter and one of the organizers of this symposium. He wrote his presentation. He looked at the films made in Latvia from beginning of 1960s up till that point, and really kind of pointed out that this is poetical cinema, what has been made in Latvia over this period of time.
Nu, protams, kā līdzīgi procesi notika arī Igaunijā un Lietuvā, bet katram savādāk. Mums tas bija tā. Un tā kā tas notika Rīgā, nu tad tā viss varētu. Kīnos studijas izanalizējam toreiz. Tas tā notika.
And of course there were similar processes going on in Lithuania and Estonia, but as we see that there are some similarities among them. So I guess we have to finish. Thank you all for participating. I can advertise once more the Baltic New Wave newspaper edition #1, and there you can read much more about those filmmakers which are whose films we see in the program, and also read some interviews and so on, and come and see the film program still.
I would like to invite everyone to see my film in full. It's 50 minutes, not 5 minutes like today. This will be shown tonight 6:30. Somewhere here in Karlovy Vary.